Okay, so this is section 5.3, cell membrane structure and permeability. In this section, we're going to look at these terms such as selectively permeable membranes, the idea of what types of materials will go through the membranes, the idea of transport proteins, carrier proteins, and then channel proteins as well as gated channel proteins, and then such things as the aquaporins. Okay, so from there, let's go over to the PowerPoint right here and take a look at that. Okay, so here we are. Take a look at the PowerPoint for this, and we're looking at this section on cell membrane structure and permeability. Okay, so this passage of materials through the membranes. Membrane is described as being selectively permeable. Now what that means is, right here, this term, what that means is certain materials will go through that membrane, other materials will not go through the membrane. So, kind of make this comparison down here with the screen door, that just like the air can come through the screen door, flies and mosquitoes can't. Selectively permeable. So, in the plasma membranes surrounding the cells, there we go, what can go through there? Well, it's going to be gases, because they are very small and they do not have electrical charges. It's also going to be small polar molecules like water and small nonpolar molecules or lipids. So you notice the main feature there of materials that can go across this membrane are that they are going to be small molecules. Now, down here, you notice three materials that are of particular importance to this thing of life that readily go across this membrane. Oxygen, well, there we go, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and water. So, we've got it. So we don't use any energy to move oxygen into the cells. If we had to use energy to pump oxygen into our cells, pump carbon dioxide out, and pump water into and out of our cells, there's probably no way that we could have enough energy to be alive. So the fact that these three substances move in and out of the cells by diffusion, just moving on their own with no use of energy, is one of those things that makes life possible. Okay, so let's go over here. Now then, whoops, there we go. I don't know why it's not allowing the whole thing to show up. Okay, passage of materials through the cell membranes. So we just saw that what can pass through the membranes of the cell are oxygen, carbon dioxide, and water. In more general terms, gases, such as nitrogen gas, carbon monoxide gas, small polar molecules like the water, small nonpolar, but right here we've got the big three that's important for life: oxygen, carbon dioxide, and water. So what does not pass through the membrane to get in and out of the cell is going to be the ions, which the ions are going to be right here, things that are electrically charged: potassium, calcium. They have this strong electrical charge, and that is repelled by that fat-like interior of the membrane of the phospholipid bilayer. Polar molecules, such as the glucose and other large molecules. Now, glucose can't go across that membrane because of its size and because of its electrical charge. And then most organic molecules, because of their size, cannot go across that plasma membrane. So, these things are restricted in their movement across the membranes, and they have to go through what are called transport proteins. That word transport is kind of cut off a little bit there. Okay, so let's go over here and take a look at this. So right here, here's our phospholipid layer, phospholipid bilayer. What we see is that oxygen can just freely slide between those phospholipids. Carbon dioxide, likewise, there's supposed to be a 2 down there, can just slide between those phospholipids. Water, well, water has a bit of an electrical charge to it, but it's a weak electrical charge. And water's a small molecule, so it is also able to just slide between these phospholipids, move across that membrane without any restrictions and without any without any use of energy on the part of the cell. Okay, so let's go to another one here. So what that means is if we have a cell right here, oxygen can go from where oxygen is in high concentration to where it's in low concentration without the cell having to do any work at all. Carbon dioxide can accumulate in the cell and then move out of the cell to where it's in lower concentration without the cell having to do any work. Water, likewise, will move from where water is in a higher concentration to where water is in a lower concentration without the cell having to do any work to cause this to happen. Okay. Now, meanwhile, other materials like calcium, for example, because of the strong electrical charge, it cannot go across that membrane. Same thing with large organic molecules like the glucose sugar. Because of the size of this molecule, it cannot go across that membrane. But there's got to be some way to get these types of materials in there. So, in and out of the cell. So, we can have transport proteins that are embedded in that membrane, and there, a material like calcium can, if I can get that, it's not supposed to be a negative sign there, can pass through that transport protein. So that gives the cell some control over the movement of these materials and allows them to accumulate in the cell. And same thing with organic molecules such as sugar, that the glucose sugar right here can move into the cell by moving through special transport proteins. Okay. So these transport proteins, they're going to move ions that have a strong electrical charge. They're going to move organic molecules that may have an electrical charge and are fairly large molecules, and polar molecules, which again have an electrical charge. So anything that is small and non-charged can move by just can move in and out of the cell by just sliding in between those phospholipid molecules, and the cell doesn't have to use any energy to cause those things to move in and out. That would be gases, nonpolar molecules, and small, weakly polar molecules. So the specifics there would be oxygen, carbon dioxide, and water move into and out of the cell without any use of energy on the part of the cell. Now, it also means the cell has no control over the movement of those materials. Okay, other materials, such as ions with strong electrical charge or organic molecules that have a large size to them, these have to be moved across a membrane by being moved through transport proteins. So, in some cases, this means the cell has to use energy to cause this to happen. In other cases, it does not. But it does mean that the cell has more control over the movement of these materials, and these type of materials, things other than oxygen, carbon dioxide, and water, can accumulate in the cell. Now, these transport proteins are very specific, and in general, one protein moves one type of material into and out of the cell. So they're not all-purpose transporters. Okay. Now we've got two major types of transport proteins. We've got what are called carrier proteins and channel proteins. Okay, the carrier proteins are going to work by bonding with the material being transported and then moving that material the carrier protein will bond with the material being transported. The carrier protein will then change its shape, which will transport the material across the membrane. The material is dropped off on the other side of the membrane. The protein goes back to its original shape and is ready to pick up another molecule to be transported. And this form of transport can be either active transport, meaning the cell uses some of its energy to cause this to happen, or it can be passive transport, which means the movement happens on its own. The cell doesn't have to use any of its energy to cause the movement to happen. So this diagram right here, we see that there's abundance of glucose on the outside of the cell. The glucose attaches to a protein. The protein then changes its shape, dropping the glucose off on the inside of the cell. After the glucose is released to the inside of the cell, the transported protein goes back to its original shape. That would be an example of a carrier protein. Now, a channel protein is going to act as a pipe that will very quickly transport material across the cell. Now, again, even though we're calling it a pipe, it is a very specific pipe. Only one type of material is going to pass through one particular protein. Now, this channel protein can be gated, and the gate can be open or closed depending on chemical conditions. So this gives the cell a little bit of control over the movement of materials into and out of the cell through this channel protein. The channel protein is always going to be associated with passive movement. That is, the cell does not use any energy to cause this type of movement to happen. So, the other thing, because these molecules can just go one behind the other, shooting through this pipe, this is a very rapid form of transport into and out of the cells. So here's an example of a gated protein. So you notice on the left, the gate is closed, and potassium is not able to move across that membrane. There on the right, we've got a different set of chemical conditions cause that gate to open, and the potassium ions very rapidly move across that membrane. Okay. Now we've got one special channel protein. It's called an aquaporin. The aquaporin is a gated water channel. And nowadays this is thought to be the main means of movement of water into and out of the cells. Notice right there that you can have 1 billion water molecules per second moving through one of these aquaporins. And these aquaporins, these channel proteins that move water, are found in all types of cells. So these aquaporins are found in bacteria, in us, in animals, in plants, fungi. So across the whole spectrum of life, these aquaporins are the main means by which water is moved into and out of the cell. So that wraps us up for this section 5.3. And again, this is material that you'll see on the exam that you're going to have online. Hope this has helped you. Thank you. Goodbye.